Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome on behalf of Zoomark and Bologna Fiere to this webinar of Zoomark. The fair is really very close, just a couple of weeks to go, that everybody is waiting so anxiously for. So it's time to take stock of the state of art of the market and also to start making forecasts with regard to the industrial, social and commercial scenarios that we are going to have and that we will collect. Now, before we at the fair then go into the various meetings at the fair, we're going to have the report of Zoomark, the various interviews and conferences and updates that we're going to have for professionals. Before we have that, today we are very happy to have representatives of leading companies in the pet world to talk about their point of view and their strategies in facing this period of enormous importance, and to help us understand the opportunities and the prospects that we should be expecting in this market in the near future. And with regard to expectations and prospects, we're going to talk about novelties and new products that Zoomark will be proposing, and the innovation trends that certainly will be the hallmark of the market in the future. We're going to do this at the Pet Vision corner or sector of the fair, which showcases the new products and indicates that the trends for the future of the pet industry. And this sector of Pet Vision will help the visitors to select the novelty that best suits their requirements and prospects, products which in fact are very innovative, creative, and which will suit their particular needs. Now, to celebrate the 20th edition of the fair, we are going to also have, alongside Pet Vision, a contest, a competition, and we're involving a pool of journalists and sector experts from Italy and abroad who will help us select the products that best represent the five trends that we have identified for Pet Vision 2023. So there are lots of things going on, lots of irons in the fire that we have, and we want to give you just a small preview of what you can expect in May next, where we're going to have 1,000 exhibitors for more than 50 countries around the world. So it'll be a great opportunity to meet people, to get to know people, to get to know about things, to exchange information. It'll be a possibility to meet and exchange views, which will help the whole market to get to know what's going on and develop new partnerships and new alliances. So I'd like to give the floor to Davide Corosher of Pet B2B, who is our partner. And also I'd like to welcome our guest. And as I say, we'll see you from the 15th to the 17th of May at Zoomark. Thank you, Pascal. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to everybody. Well, first thing, I'd like, first of all, to thank you as well for actually linking in to listen to this webinar, because we want to have a webinar which will really give some information. I'd like to thank Zoomark and Bologna Fiere for having organized these webinars in the run-up to the trade show, especially because this meeting and trade fair is happening in a very particular delicate moment after the pandemic, which was a real earthquake and caused great changes in some sectors of our industry. Today, we're seeing a settling down, as it were, and the indications are fairly strong. And this will help us to see how the market will develop in the next few years. And in fact, things might turn out to be very different to what we might have expected just a couple of months ago, because there are many things going on. And from this point of view, I'd like to underline how the fair of Zoomark is very close, and certainly we hope that everybody will come in person to discover the new products, the most important initiatives, and what will be the hallmarks of the market in the next few years. Now, as a preview to warm up for this trade fair, we've had these webinars to give a preview and an indication of the key aspects. And we have key experts to talk about this. And in this particular web fair, we want to especially ask ourselves about how novelties and new products, in fact, will fit into this rather uncertain market of things that are changing. We've seen changes in distribution, as we heard, prices which have changed, purchasing habits which are different. Obviously, we can't go into all these aspects this evening, but we want to give you a foretaste, as it were, and give you food for thought so that we can go into this better later on at the actual fair. Now, I'd like to present our speakers today who are linked in. We have Giorgio Massoni, who is the General Manager of Sanipet. Hi, everybody. Says Giorgio. Marco Angeli, who's Account Manager of Camon. Hello. Vito Bolognesi, who is the CEO of Pet Village. Hello. And Paola Cane, who is the CEO of Mia Solutions and in charge of the Pet Vision sector. Now, I'd like to thank with you, Paola. I'd like to ask you to tell us something about how you thought up and what is in store for us with regard to the Pet Vision section. Now, Pet Vision from the last edition is a particular area which is dedicated to new things. Now, why? Now, as you quite rightly said before, today, more than anything else, the only thing that we can, if you like, trust and hang on to as in the industry, as the producers, as retail and buyers, is change. That's the only thing we really know is going to happen, is change. Nothing is as it was before, and we have dynamics ongoing which are completely different. Even in the pet care and pet food sector, evolution is very rapid for producers, for entrepreneurs, for owners of pet shops, and for everybody. And it gets very difficult to indicate what, in fact, will have an impact on our commercial activity and our business. Now, Pet Vision, therefore, helps us to pick up or even to anticipate and understand beforehand what's actually going on in terms of trends in our market. It helps us on the one hand, it helps the retailer and the pet shop, specialty shop, to be guided in his or her choices and to have a sort of roadmap as to what in fact will be seen in the fair and therefore on the market. And we'll see the products that best interpret new customer demands. On the other hand, obviously, the interest in picking up on mega trends is something that everybody has, the consumer, the shop, the industry, because the big trends that influence our sector will probably be those trends which in the 4 or 5 years to come will really come out and be influence our whole industry. And this will also rely on the very intense relationship people have with animals, which is only going to grow. Now, to give an idea of allowing the industry to present their products, and also their R&D sacrifices, all the efforts that have gone in these last few years, despite the pandemic, the problem of the supply chain, increase in price of raw materials and so on. The entrepreneurs and industries have done an awful lot to bring about new products and done a great deal to help and bring these onto the market. And also the pet shop, the specialty shop, in fact, looks to the interests of Pet Vision to help them choose the products of interest. This is the second edition, as I said. It will help people to enhance their investments and to make them better and better investments. And as Paula, in fact, said, we're going to underline this because we have this contest which will give prizes to a prize, a symbolic prize, obviously. It's a plaque, which in fact is for the product which most enhances these 5 mega trends. Which are these? And these are the 5 mega trends that are important. First of all, green transition, the trend, obviously, of functional and some healthy products is another one. And a new trend is value for money. In other words, trying to interpret and produce products which are careful for the wallet of consumers. And then tailor-made, again, there's increasing personalization of products, and that's important. And then spoil me more is the 5th. In other words, it's all those products that tend to spoil and cuddle up pets more, because the relationship that we have with our pets is increasingly strong. Now, obviously, these are trends which don't concern pet food only, but also pet care. And indeed, they go across the board, right across through pharmaceuticals, and they not always do they involve much loved cats and dogs, but they are also found in niche products as well, in products for rodents, for aquarium lovers and fish, but also reptiles, if you like, pets which are less frequent. But certainly they are involved in all these trends. Well, let's start with green transition. This is the theme of the year, if you like, and probably it'll be the theme of the next decade. This trend had already come out before the pandemic, and it had become mainstream even before that. And then it's obviously human to concentrate on one crisis at a time. And the climate change and green transition problem passed into second place when the pandemic came upon us, and we had to get over that. Now it's come back as a theme with products which are in part recycled, regenerated, reconstituted, and so on, but with many other aspects. For example, products that become more green, starting from their packaging, right through to products which have a specific formula, production models, also lower energy consumption in their making, and so on. All these factors go towards customers who are increasingly attentive to the environmental awareness and want to be part and parcel of sustaining the planet, also in the way they buy and what they buy. Now, value for money, we know, unfortunately, we know directly, all of us, that today we have a situation in which prices have generally risen. And unfortunately, that is a big burden for many families. Now, in the last 3 years, we've had a crisis. There's also the war. The geopolitical situation has, over time, in fact, caused a weakening of the purchasing power of all consumers, also, of course, of pet owners. And the instruments, or if you like, the concrete solutions that many companies are trying to offer their consumers include, for example, products which have a good cost effectiveness, and in other words, cost benefit which is high. This to try and give a response to the economic problems that people have, without, however, penalizing innovation and the range of choice of products. Now, the third large trend which was also present in the last version, but in a different way, is health and care. In other words, consumers who are attentive not just to products that look good or are good, but are especially thought and developed to meet certain requirements and needs and to ensure the welfare and healthy life of their animals, of their pets. Now, this is a trend which isn't something new. It is a persistent, consolidated trend, and it involves many sectors, from pharmaceuticals, cosmetic products, for example, toys, which stimulate cognitive development and so on. So it's not just a question of food, but it's across the board, the awareness and the emphasis on health and care of all food, but also products like grooming products and toiletries and so on. Now, Spoil Me More is an emerging niche. Now, that's a trend that comes from the need to spoil our pets in a very, if you like, personalized way, and to look after them in a very special way. And here we have special foods, specialty foods, specific foods for breed, for age, and also this is seen more specific products in cosmetic toiletry products. And we have seen that there has been a development of increasingly tailor-made products for specific age groups and breeds of animals. And then again, with the idea of spoiling our pets, we have the whole range of snacks and treats which help to consolidate our relationship with our pets. Especially, we think of certain toys, products which especially treat or give rewards to animals. And in the last couple of years, in fact, we've seen a very strong growth of snacks, the snacks market, which until a couple of years ago was a market that was consolidated. There wasn't a great deal of innovation nor movement, but many companies now recently have made enormous investments to develop new products characterized by new ingredients, new functional ingredients, and so on, to bring about a real wave of innovation in the sector of spoiling our pets and looking after them. Now, Pet Vision this year will be very broad. It will be focused on the originality, the innovation of the product, the quality, the design, the sustainability, and also technology. So we all look forward to seeing you at Zoomark in Pet Vision. Thank you, Paula, and thank you for having told us what we can expect from this very interesting project. And I also think that it's very interesting to hear about these new things and where these novelties are placed in the particular market that we find ourselves in, and what the operators are facing. So on this point, therefore, I'd like to give the floor to our other speakers to try and have a deep dive with them into some of these issues that we're looking at. So first of all, I'd like to ask Giorgio Massoni to give us his point of view with the fact to the fact that the pet market today is still very dynamic, got lots of novelties from a retail distribution point of view. Competition is very strong. And in the last year and a half, we have seen an increase, however, of logistics, the price of products, and we've seen that the price lists have gone up because of all this. Now, talking about prices, has it calmed down? Is it prices continuing to rise? And what about the impact of these prices? Thank you, Davide. Well, let's start with a topic which, if you like, is rather difficult. Paula said before that we are seeing a particular moment in time in our market, which still remains a market with great potential. The pet population is growing all the time, and the relationship between pets and their families is stronger all the time, gets stronger all the time. And that, of course, gives us a positive potential in this market of ours, which allows us to look at the future in a positive way. Times are not easy. To come to your question and the question of the supply chain, well, my point of view today is that in several areas we see uncertainty, which is still very much the key characteristic. If, for example, we talk about raw materials, and I give you the point of view of a producing company, of a manufacturing company. Today, we have a year in which it's not easy to decide exactly what the prices of the raw materials are going to be. We can't determine it. There's some raw materials give a more stable outlook, others not. Things are uncertain. For example, cereals, grain, subject to seasonality. We have a series of problems also from a climate point of view as well. We were talking about green transition before, and today this has an effect on our supply chain. It really has a tangible effect on our supply chain. For example, there's a question of drought, and we still don't know how things are going to turn out. And this is probably going to have a real big impact on the availability of cereals and grains. So this is an area where still today, we really can't get good forecasts and see how things are going to pan out. Another aspect we all well know, of course, is the question of electricity, gas, energy factors, which especially in the second part of last year had a really heavy impact on the whole of the supply chain, families as well, of course. Today, we see that we have seen a fallback compared to the peak of 2022. But it has stabilized on a higher level compared to what it was before. We're talking about an increase that is less than last year, certainly. So all these things have an effect on the industry. It's true that we are seeing a slow return to stabilization, but still we don't have clarity as to what the impact will be in the coming year. Thank you, Giorgio. I'd also like to ask Marco Angeli as well, the same thing. What's your point of view? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Zoomark for allowing Carmen to participate in this very interesting debate. And I'd like, of course, to extend an invitation, as of course we're going to be at the fair, invite all of you to come to the fair where we can go further into the themes and topics that we are going to discuss here. And of course, we can't go into them really fully in such a short time. Well, I think the world of accessories, where Cameron is a player, is different from pet food, because we were very conditioned by the increase in freight prices and rates. But now we're seeing that these costs, in fact, have fallen. And that means that in many categories, in many products, we can now present price lists which have fallen, and that hasn't happened for years. Now, for the end consumer, this slide back will be visible with time, of course. It's not that the consumer will be aware immediately of the positive shift in prices. But this is a not positive effect, however. I mean, practically everything has hit us in the last couple of years, but companies have continued to develop novelties, be innovative without ever stopping and getting worried about the situation, certainly, but at the same time, exploiting the difficult time to work even harder, go further and push back horizons even further to be ready for the return to stabilization and to forge ahead. Now, I think that the range of products is increasingly large, and obviously the purchasing power of consumers has fallen, as Giorgio mentioned before. But increasing the product range and its depth means that it's still a very interesting market, and we can still develop things well, and we can continue on the road that we started down before the pandemic. Now, I'd like to stay with the pet care sector and ask Vito Bolognesi to tell us about his experience. Thank you. Thank you. I too would like to thank Zoomark and you for giving us the opportunity of how we see the market and how we see our work in this particular moment. Now, the first question has to do about the dynamism of the market, how dynamic it is, and innovations. Now, here we have a positive outlook, because this is one of the most dynamic at the moment. There's a level of interest on the demand side, which is really great. From a distribution point of view, we are the sector that everybody's looking at. And perhaps with certain excessive expectations, but everybody has really good intentions and is very positive. Very often we see pet products in distribution channels which weren't traditional before. So there's a great deal of new ventures and new channels. And we're seeing producers and companies that weren't traditionally part of our market, and they have come in, and they are new margins out there. So it's an opportunity, or if you like, a threat. Some people may say, well, that's a good thing. There are greater possibilities of purchasing. Now, specialists, people who are part of this sector with marketing and so on, it's a fantastic moment. And I think that Zoomark will show this. I think there'll be a large number of buyers and retailers be there. With regard to the prices, well, Marco's already talked about that. I agree. There has been a great deal of tension before, but this tension on the prices in some areas has in fact fallen back and lessened. And now the transport freight charges have gone down, and or if they haven't, they're going to go down quite soon. So that's a good point. Yes, thank you, Vito. I too would like to ask you, well, we had a snapshot of what is happening, not only in the price area, but also the vibrant development in the distribution scenario and so on. I'd like to ask you, in what way are manufacturers and this it is a supply chain facing this dynamism of the market, this dynamic market, and how do manufacturers and how is the industry, in fact, looking at the launch of new products, novelty products, in a market where things have not yet settled? With regard to prices of products, I perhaps should go into more detail than I did before. There are many areas for pharmaceuticals and so on. The prices have remained fairly stable. Services, products and went up, but now they're going down. With regard to other aspects, hasn't really been a great deal of change because the cost of energy has gone up. If you like, there are several sectors, and each, if you like, has results unto their own. But the year nonetheless did start well. And listening to distribution retailers, I don't see and hear so many complaints. The growth rates are higher than inflation, and that means that the demand side is there. In some areas of products, the price increases are quite high and are still being accepted. Of course, that depends on the demand side, as the various brands and their strength on the market. But the prices did go up because in the basket of consumption items that every family has to face, of course, these increases have been enormous, and people have to choose. In our sector, we, as Paula in fact said, we have had a great dynamism with regard to R&D to develop novelty products, new things of all kinds, and innovations of the actual line of the packaging and so on. I think this is the most interesting part of our job. Because it touches our customers, in fact, and that's why trade fairs are so very, very important. You can have a talk with a colleague or go to another booth and see something different, see a new fashion and trends, for example. That's something that really is exclusive to trade shows. Now, I'd like to go in the inverse order, and I'd like to ask Marco the same thing. Well, obviously, I agree with everything that Vito said, but also from a different point of view, answering that first question, to be able to look at the problems of the recent past in a different way, what we've done is we've tried to go back to our origins, if you like. What we did was we tried to start producing in Italy again, and not just in the East, Of course, we know that the costs in Italy are different, but that nonetheless guarantees us greater security when there are upsets, because the big problem that we've had in this period is that all the problems that we had were independent of course, what we wanted. We had to just take them on board. We could do nothing about them. So we've come back to Italy or even to Europe, and I think this will help us in the long term, but also in the short term. It'll give us greater guarantees, because one thing that Paolo said before is right. This sector of ours is very developing rapidly, perhaps even too rapidly. We seem to perhaps it's overestimated a little bit, or as Vito intimated before, but we're always trying to catch up and run behind things. All companies are coming out all the time with new products, with new things, and we too, of course, are doing likewise. And if we think about the products with regard to human personal care, creams, little wipes and so on. Well, those things weren't considered in our market before, or even in the other sectors, but now they're really key. But so we're doing all this, but with the idea also of returning to produce once again, manufacture once again in Italy, and develop our own products. Thank you. Certainly. Onshoring of production is certainly one of the very big trends that we're seeing, and which have been triggered in the last few months and years. Giorgio Massoni, what's your take on this? Well, the second part of your question with regard to innovation, Vito, but also Marco said that innovation and novelty products have always been important on our market, and today it's even more important. I think at Zoomark, we'll really see a vast range of novelties, different approaches. I think the pet food industry is very active. It's and the attention to nutrition. Also, we see this in food for humans. The interest of nutrition is increasing. The trends that are coming out all the time. And this is seen also in the pet food world. The food trends, I think, are very strong, and they condition our industry as a whole. So it's very important, as has been done in the past, and also in the recent period, we've always had to, and we have to work on the innovation and new ingredients, new raw materials, also vis-a-vis sustainability, green transition, sustainability. These are the first points that Paola mentioned in her macro trends. This certainly filters through to packaging, maintenance in industry, our industrial processes, using less energy and so on. These are all issues which are increasingly topical, and the R&D that companies are investing in goes especially in this sense of nutrition and sustainability. So, Giorgio, still on the same issue, I'd like to ask you, will these be the key macro trends that you presume you will see at the trade show? Well, I expect at the trade fair to have the macro trends confirmed, the macro trends of the last few years confirmed. For example, single protein, monoprotein, or single animal protein. This has come to the fore very much in the last few years, and I expect this to go even further. And then specialist food for cat and dogs, and specialty foods, digestible, healthsome foods and ingredients. I think that this is a trend which is with us and has been with us, but we will see this further confirmed. Again, grain-free or free from products. Grain-free is a trend that has been with us for a couple of years. It's very strong in many other markets, but also in Italy, it is now pretty big. We'll see also the segment of natural foods in the wet foods, for example. This is something that is very strong in the Italian market. So these are some of the macro trends that I'm sure will be confirmed at Zoomark. And then there are new trends or trends that are growing, raw materials, which are alternative proteins, insects, for example, that have now been talked of for a couple of years. It's still a niche market in our market, but also plant-based products, areas that are still a bit niche, but I think in the next few years, they will grow. I think there'll be a very strong offering in the snacks department. Paolo was talking about the importance of this market segment. Snacks and treats in Italy, percentage-wise, is the fastest growing sector compared to food. And the percentage of growth is quite strong, even if it has an overall small revenue share as yet. For cat and dogs, that's important, but also it's extending into the functional area. The snacks are not just a reward, but there's something which completes the nutrition and food uptake, which is supposed to be helpful for cats and dogs. And I think this will be a particularly innovative area. In fact, I'm curious to see whether the trends that today are present in other markets will, in fact, come to Italy, come here. For example, freeze-dried food. This is a trend which is strong in America already. It's a particular technique of freezing and dehydrating the food, freeze-dried food. And I think that that's going to come to our market as well. So I think it's a very vibrant market. It's a period that there's certainly be no shortage of new proposals. Certainly, I completely agree. Marco Angeli, in the sector of pet care accessories, what are the most dynamic area? What is the most dynamic area? The idea of compostability, natural product, the sustainability of the products that were mentioned before. I mean, this is renewing the offering, is it, of products? What are the biggest challenges for a manufacturer? The biggest challenge is to, in fact, meet the request of the customer, to please the customer. As Paula said before, the green area will be the big player in the market in the next few years. Today, or for some years now, manufacturers have been looking and doing things about this. For example, if we now have reduced in packaging, plastic, and cardboard, we have recycled plastic only, we have a series of things just in recycled plastic. So there's a tendency to produce green, environmental friendly, compostable products. And the market is, the response of the market is somewhat bland. If we look at northern countries like Germany, for example, we know that this sort of product is very successful and very well distributed, much more than here. But I think that it will happen. And also we have to make it happen. But this will come about in the next couple of years here. There'll be very strong development. Camon, for years now, has in fact been independent in its heating requirements, and we've been independent energy-wise, and this before the whole question came about. So we've been sustainable for some time. This is thanks to our owner, but R&D in this sector, you might want to correct me here, but I think the R&D has been more than the result that we've actually reaped on the shelf. But again, what comes off the shelf and what the consumer buys is, in fact, of course, what the consumer wants. But I think that the trade fairs like Zoomark help us a lot, and we have great expectations for this because, of course, it is very important for the welfare of our animals. Vito, I'd like to ask you the same question. Well, I see that certain trends will be more accentuated. Natural products, for example, the quality of the time passed with one animal, with one's pet, will be important, or the similitude of pet and owner. I'm happy if my pet is happy. That's something that has really come to the fore. Recent research on the approach of the consumer to our sector's products in the question of natural products is still a fairly limited concern as yet. The consumer is not something that they're prepared to spend more for. And if you like, this is a reality check that we can see clearly because there's a greater attention focus abroad. And then we also have a younger generation of consumers who are more aware of this and more interested in sustainability. But here too, this type of a consumer is as yet not very strong, not very large, so much for natural products. Other trends that I see, as Giorgio said, is the snack world, because the area of interaction with one's pet is something which is exploding. Humanization of pets is going on a pace. What we consume, what animals consume, what our pets consume is something which is a very strong awareness. And of course, that has an influence on toys and snacks and rewards. As I said before, seeing an animal playing and interacts with you relaxes and helps the owner to be happier and more relaxed. And then there's the new sector of devices and domestic furnishings, furniture. Again, this is still within the ambit of interaction with one's pet. Okay, I think that we're now almost coming to the conclusion of this moment. I'd like to go around the floor once more. Giorgio, you mentioned alternative raw materials before. The fact that increasingly also to encourage sustainability of the supply chain, ingredients contain alternative raw materials, for example, plants, insects, and so on. Now, which is the most promising trend? Is this the right moment for these new trends to take hold, or will they remain niche markets, very specific for very specific customer requirements? Well, that's a question that's not easy to answer. We've been talking about this for a long time. Sustainable raw materials for several years now, that's been a topic. It might well be that now the time is ripe for this thing to take off. I think that in terms of the big numbers, well, I don't see that. I think that these will remain a niche product. As I said before, I'm convinced that the link between human nutrition and food and that of our pets is a very close link. And therefore, certain trends will be developed in the wake of developments of human food trends. It's true that this is coming to us forward in the human food field, but I don't think in Italy we're going to really have large numbers in this sort of niche market. It won't be a niche market anymore. I don't see that happening immediately. I think that R&D will go in this direction and it will get stronger. Today we talk about insects. Perhaps we'll develop sustainable products which will be different in the next few years. A lot of work is going to have to go into this, and therefore I expect that in the future this trend will increase, even if in Italy a particular approach to nutrition and food will remain. But the relationship between a pet owner and his or her pet certainly will push us in this direction. Thank you, Giorgio. Vito, the new purchasing behaviors, in fact, will influence the choice of products on the part of retailers to put on their shelves. So what's the attitude here of retailers? Now, as was said before, the snack and toys area sector is something which the retailer looks at. Technological aspects, for example, food dispensers or water fountains and so on, because this has to do with the quality of time with the animal, and also with cameras, for example, it enhances an awareness of what the animal does when it's alone. And then again, certain furnishings and items of furniture coming to the fore because the spaces in a city, for example, are very small, and therefore there's still this idea of allowing your pet to have a very happy life. And therefore, this is something which, from a retail point of view, the retailers have to be aware of. And I think there are commercial opportunities where you can add value, as Paolo said before, the supplements, parapharmaceuticals, and so on. And here I think that retailers can do quite a lot. They can provide consultancy, be it advisory, to encourage the consumer to help keep their animal healthy. And again, the retailer has to be aware of the sort of wallet spending capacity, and also to provide important advice. And this is a way of the specialist stores to help fight the enormous increase in retailing outlets. Now, let's talk about communication. communication is all important to launch a product. It's of key importance. Now, in what way is the industry called upon to get across its message to the final consumer? I mean, that's the $64 million question. I mean, communication is fundamental. Everything is communication. I mean, we're doing communication. We're communicating in this particular time. Interesting but difficult question, therefore. Obviously, advertising has changed its direction. If you think in the past, if you're as old as I am, if you think about the advertising in the big daily newspapers, which are still the big daily newspapers, but which in fact don't have such a large circulation as before. So from the newspapers, we've gone to the social network. That becomes the main medium, especially if you're younger, but also the not so young people use social media, and the social media gets across immediately, quickly, clear message, and you cannot bypass it. You have to use social media. That's a very, very important aspect. Another aspect, which is perhaps even more important, is some companies have done it for years, some have only just started. That is to have a data bank of their find customers, the pet owner, their habits, where they go on holiday, if they take their cat pet, if they live in the city or in a rural area, but also a database of the actual pet. What it is, where they go, and so on. Having these data is fundamental for companies like Camon. We don't have direct selling of our product, for example. For us, it's very important. And this will help dog owners to be able to buy the most interesting products in the various channels available and allow them to find these products. So I think this is a real challenge for the future. And then afterwards, of course, trade shows help you to meet up with people to understand new requirements and cat and dogs, but also the minor pets, minor only because they have a lower share of the market. Because if you've got a rarer animal, you're just as fond of them as you are of your cat and dog. And then again, also communication and being able to give an answer to anybody who calls in and who asks for information. So to keep up the channels of communication. I work for Camon, for example. The idea is to reinforce the Camon brand to ensure that Camon is a response and provides a response to the customer. But I'm sure that this also is the same for the brands and the industry of my colleagues here. But again, communication is the byword of our sector. Thank you, Marco. Certainly the opportunities offered by the world of communications are infinite. So I'd like to thank everybody. We've kept within the hour that we had given ourselves. We don't want to keep you any longer. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of you who linked in and wish you all successful success in your work, but especially we hope to see you at Zoomark, because as we said, in fact, today we couldn't go into a really deep dive in the topics that we have raised, but just to give you a foretaste of this, and hope to see you at the Zoomark. I'd also like to thank all our speakers, and goodbye, everybody.